Welcome everyone to my stress management talk. This talk is in companionship with a video put out by Scientific Frontiers, the American Science Frontiers, which is a video series that was out probably about 12 years ago, hosted by Alan Alda. The video that I'm referring to is called Worried Sick. For those of you that are on now live, you received an email with a link to that video, which is on YouTube. And for those of you that are watching this as a recording, just type in Worried Sick into YouTube and you will get that video. It's an hour-long video. Like I said, it was probably done 12 to 15 years ago, but it's still very relevant to what I am talking to it about today. Also, if you haven't seen the video, I'll make reference to it, but that won't diminish the information at all. You can also see it post talk as well, and that is just fine. Okay. Stress management is one of the three areas that we concentrate on in cardiac rehab. The other two is exercise and diet. Now, the thing with exercise and diet is that they can be measured and they're very tangible. When we talk about diet, we're talking about carbohydrates, protein, fats, calories, minerals, so many things. You pick up a package at the store, you can look at the nutritional facts list and derive all sorts of information from that. It is very, not only is it tangible, you can taste it, right? In terms of exercise, very same thing. We're talking about speed and incline, calories burned, METs used. So many things can be measured in that way. Your heart rate, your target heart rate. Again, no one doubts that it exists. It's all very tangible. You can talk about it all day. But when it comes to stress management, how many units of stress are you under right now? Usually I get question marks in that regard because there is no way to measure stress. And so therefore, I think it gets a short shrift because of that. That because you can't measure it right now, well, it doesn't exist. Or it either I have no stress or I have so much stress in my life. There's either one or the other, generally, is what I see with my patients commonly. And stress isn't like that, actually. If you came to class today and you were on time, you were under a certain amount of stress. Absolutely. So to talk about stress, we need to talk about the autonomic nervous system. And so the autonomic nervous system breaks down into two parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. This chart that I have up here is nothing that you need to be too concerned about. I had to memorize it to answer questions correctly on a test, and then didn't have to look at it again after that. But to understand that there's two parts to this autonomic nervous system. One is kind of based around stress that we talk about, and the other one's around relaxation, of course. So the sympathetic nervous system and automatic system is what I refer to as the gas pedal. Basically, this is sympathetic towards all outside stimulus. Anytime that something happens, you hear something, you see something, this stimulates your nervous system, and certain things happen when this happens. When we talk about a stimulated nervous system, oftentimes we talk about the fight or flight response. Chemicals are produced during fight or flight: catecholamine, cortisol, adrenaline, other ones as well. And I mention these, catecholamine and cortisol, is because in large amounts, these set up an environment for heart disease, basically, in large amounts, I said. So in terms of fight or flight, what's an instance of this is I'm in my kitchen, for instance, and I open up a cupboard and a plate falls towards me, and I'm looking at that plate as it falls towards me, and I say, isn't it interesting how it grows larger as it approaches? The thing about that is, what should I do? I should grab it or jump out of the way of it. And that is fight or flight. I am doing something about it, or I'm just getting the hell out. And that's fight or flight response. And I would bet that fight or flight response in some time in your life has probably saved you from injury, if not death, at some level. It is a very good thing to have happen. This stress is acute stress. And acute stress is what we are designed around. It is very important that we have this kind of stress. Without it, you're not going to live very long, quite frankly. But the acute part, meaning that it happens and then it's gone, is very important. That it is brief. So I'm driving to work, and a dog runs out in front of me, and I screech my brakes on to keep from hitting it. And I go, oh my God, I almost hit a dog. And the dog goes, oh my God, I almost got hit by a car. But the difference is what is happening 10 minutes from then. 10 minutes from after that time, the dog is probably laying up under a tree and probably not thinking about it very much. However, for me, if I care to, I'll pull into work and go, Jeff, you can't believe it. I, almost hit this dog, and I almost went careening off the road and could have crashed my car and died. And that I am telling this story over again. And every time I tell this story, I will elicit these same chemicals over and over and over again, because my body knows no difference from the fight or flight response that was generated by the dog jumping in front of me and the fight or flight response that I'm eliciting every time I tell the story. And so I'm taking what is an acute stress and turning it into a chronic stress at this point. And it's these chronic stresses, whether they are real or fabricated in our minds, is what sets up an environment. And I mean to kind of stress that point, an environment in our arteries that can set up these claudication, these blockages in our arteries, and thus resulting in heart disease. Of those three things I mentioned, exercise, diet, and stress, it has been my opinion, my unscientific survey of all the patients that have gone through this program in the 21 years I have been here, that this one, I believe, outpaces the other two to some degree. That why patients come to me is more about stress than it is about diet and exercise. And I mean, I've been involved in exercise for quite a long time. It means a lot to me. I think it's a very worthwhile thing to do. I don't mean to diminish the other two, but if you were going to say, if there's one thing I need to concentrate on, I would say stress is that one more than the other two. And because it doesn't have any tangibles or any way to measure it, any way to see if you're stepping on a scale and the stress is increased, then generally people are not thinking about it very much. And it is a slow boil that we all put ourselves under.
Casey,
Go ahead.
uh, I find that for me, that exercise is regular, vigorous exercise, a really great way to release stress, particularly if I get outdoors to do it.
That is absolutely true. And it is a physical way to put yourself into my next topic here is parasympathetic tone, which is getting on the brake pedal. By exercising, you do stimulate the responses in terms of exercise, and all of you know this to some degree. When you come in and I take a blood pressure, and then if you pay attention to what that blood pressure is, or you have me print them out for you, which I am very happy to do if you wish, and you see at the end of class after exercise, your blood pressure is always lower than it was. Not always, but I'm going to say 90% of the time it's lower at the end of class than it was at the beginning of class. And that is a response that we don't know completely why that happens. We have a pretty good ideas of why it happens, but it is a way to induce a kind of parasympathetic tone um, after exercise. So you're completely right about that statement. And it is also when we get into talking about meditation or stress management in some degree, it is also you concentrating on something about your body, and that'll make more sense here as I get along in this talk as well. But the parasympathetic tone in your body, the brake pedal, is when you get into relaxation and the immune response is then increased. This is where the maintenance of your body happens, is in this parasympathetic tone. If you're constantly pressing on the gas pedal, which we're all very inclined to do, we all love stimulus, a lot of stimulus. And we have many devices and ways, and even after the past year we've all lived through, and the current one we're kind of going through now, it is very stimulating to your sympathetic nervous system. You need a break from your sympathetic nervous system. And that's where parasympathetic tone comes in. Now, in the video that you will or have watched, the Alan Alda interviewed Herbert Benson. Herbert Benson is a researcher in stress and stress management issues, and did much of the very early research, and is the the father of this kind of the stress responses, and that was a term he coined actually. In the video, he interviews the Dalai Lama. Now, the Dalai Lama is a religious leader of Buddhism. He's also has been very active in promoting peace throughout the world, has won the Nobel Peace Prize. But Herbert Benson was interviewing him because of the meditation that he and his monks participate in, called Tumo meditation. And what he was interested in was the physiological effects of doing this type of meditation. And the Dalai Lama was very open to having science brought in, being a man of science himself, um, and to see what the physical response was to doing this kind of meditation. Now, meditation can be a loaded word for some people. Meditation has been a part of every single major religion that we know of. In Christianity, that type of meditation is called prayer. And the reason why there's a form of meditation in every single kind of religion is because there are humans involved in every single kind of religion, and we all have this frontal cortex that will um, be stressed out by uh, things that have happened in our life in the past or in the present, or what might happen in the future, whether they be real or imagined. And we tend to step on that gas pedal and not get off of it. And this is a way for us to step on the brake pedal to some degree. At least this is one form of doing that. Now, I also want to point out that in the video, there were monks that were sitting in a room doing meditation, and they live in northern India at this point. They had been exiled there by the Chinese, and northern India is basically the Himalayas. So this is a place that doesn't have a lot of resources. These monks live in cold rooms, and they were showing us how they were doing this meditation, and they would take towels soaked in water and they would put them on their backs while they were doing this meditation. And this is for us to understand what we're watching. Other than that, we just think there's a bunch of guys just sleeping in a room, sitting up. But in fact, they're doing meditation. And when you do meditation, one of the physiological effects were that it dilates your arteries. And every single cardiac patient should be interested in that, to dilate your arteries. is to mean that you're not going to close one off and thus have a heart attack again or a stroke or any other ways. And basically, they would put these towels on them, and because they were so good on that brake pedal, that they would circulate blood to their extremities, so much so that they would just steam away the water in that towel. Whereas if you or I did this, it would shock us so much that we would put our foot on the gas pedal and, oh my God, that is so cold. And we would constrict our arteries, and you're risking hypothermia or frostbite at that level. And so that is the big difference between what they were doing and what we see. Now, I would be amiss if I didn't mention something about sleep, because for most of us Americans, the only time we ever get any parasympathetic tone is by sleeping. And so I am very interested in sleep. Um, some of the information I know about sleep is that you can go without food longer than you can go without sleep. You will die of lack of sleep way before you starve to death. And this is, again, when we have that parasympathetic tone. This is based on a study I read that getting less than 6 hours of sleep, and now I'm going to stop for just a second there. This can be controversial, particularly for those of us who are that are of a certain age. Uh, we tend, as we get older, to sleep a little bit less than we did when we were, say, in our teens. I coached at the high school for 16 years, and I had athletes from the ages of 13 to what they are as a senior. And we know that that particular group should be getting about 10 hours of sleep a night, which they would all laugh at me when I would mention that to them, by the way. So many ways to stimulate yourself with phones and computers and TVs. Yeah, you could keep yourself up all night, no problem. But this study kind of focused on adults, and getting less than 6 hours of sleep had its issues. One of which was that your body would start conserving the calories that it took in, and you could gain up to 12 to 30% weight gain because of this lack of sleep. Now, you may wonder why that is. A little bit of it uh, would lead us to look towards anthropology, in that if you're not getting much sleep, it may mean that you're, uh, as a hunter gatherer society, and most of human history has been that of hunter gatherers, and we still have all that genetic coding in us, and that if we're not getting a lot of sleep, we must be looking for food. And so therefore our bodies need to be conservative of the expenditure of calories and maybe start storing some away for future use. You start gaining weight, one of the risks is an increase in diabetes. And what we see is people not getting as much sleep, they have an increase, 30% increase in type 2 diabetes. And the thing that really surprised me the most was the increase in heart disease in people that don't get a full night's sleep. 50% increase risk in heart disease. That's no small number at all. We're not. This is fairly serious stuff. I didn't post what we are currently getting as Americans in terms of sleep, because I think those numbers can be a little. It depends on what age you are and what kind of situation you're in, and socioeconomic issues, those kind of things. So I'm not necessarily. They were interesting to look at, but I don't think they tend to help us in this regard. So, about falling asleep, staying asleep, a very important thing to do is to avoid caffeine and alcohol. I have a dear friend, and one of you on this uh, Zoom call here know this friend, and he can drink coffee uh, at night, right before going to bed. And I'm so impressed, and he falls asleep. But the thing with caffeine and alcohol, and many people can do this if you can tolerate it if you drink enough caffeine, you can get to a point where it won't keep you awake at night. However, the drug, for the reason that you're drinking or drinking coffee for its caffeine, is uh, that stimulant basically can interrupt your sleep cycle, and alcohol can do the same thing. What happens here is that these two drugs, as you fall asleep, you start to go into a beta rhythm, and that's you kind of dozing off. You fall asleep, and then over a bit of time, you start to go into deeper sleep, what is called a delta sleep, and that is your deep, deep sleep. It's fairly hard to wake you from that sleep. And then through that time, you then come up and back up to REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And this is where you generally have dreams. And this is a very shallow sleep. And you often will wake up uh, during this time, or you're very close to consciousness at the very least. And then the cycle goes around again. And you may do these cycles 3 or 4 times in an evening. And the problem with caffeine and alcohol that it will interrupt these cycles. And so even though you are sleeping, it may not be as restful as it could be without these drugs on board. And I'm talking about in excessive quantities when I'm talking about these drugs. Personally, I really cannot drink any caffeine after 5 o'clock. And even then, it's still very questionable. It still affects me in terms of sleeping. Obviously, I don't drink that much caffeine because I don't have much of a tolerance for it, or alcohol for that matter either. Um, so, something to think about there. Another thing is to avoid big meals. Now, this is a very large tradition in America to eat your biggest meal at the end of the day. And if you have a lot of things going on, it may get pushed to very late in that day, very much closer to your sleep time. Um, when we do my nutritional talks, which is next week and the weeks after, we will talk about um, what size of meal and when would be great to eat that meal. And ideally, your biggest meal comes at the beginning of the day rather than the end of the day, uh, which would also help in this regard as well in terms of your sleeping. Another thing is to decrease the light uh, in your house in the evening. This mimics what actually happens outside, and your body's very in tune to what does happen outside. Your exercise and your light absorption should be all done during the daylight hours to help your body get into what is called the circadian rhythm. You can look that up. In our body, ebbs and flows is another cycle that you kind of go through in terms of awake and drowsiness and awake and drowsiness. And what really sets you right in this regard is the amount of sunlight you get yourself exposed to and the level of exercise. I learned this fairly early on when I would go over to Europe to ride my bike. It's always a night flight over there, and I am horrible at sleeping on a plane. I always admire those people that can fall asleep in the seat of a car or on a plane going anywhere. When I get over there, I basically had no sleep at all. And then my friends would then build the bike, get me out there and riding during the day, stimulating gas pedal stuff all day long. So, and my body wants to go to brake pedal, but we just keep the light outside and the exercise going so that when it comes around to going to bed that evening, I am done with my jet lag. I am falling asleep on their schedule and waking up on their schedule. And that's all to do with this exposure to light. Now, the thing is in your own home, if you have a lot of lights on in the evening, your body is basically producing drugs to keep you awake because it thinks it is daytime out. So it is important to start decreasing their lights, or think about what is the lighting in your house and how much light are you being exposed to. I ask any of you rhetorically, if I went to your basement and pulled the main switch and killed all the lights in your house in the evening, how long would it be until you fell asleep with absolutely nothing to look at or nothing to do? Your ancestors would have not had electricity. I mean, electricity is pretty recent on the scene in terms of human history. How long would they stay awake? And quite frankly, they fell asleep pretty soon after the sun went down. Another thing to pay attention is these gadgets we have, whether it a cell phone or a computer or a TV screen. All of these things emit blue light, and it's the blue light that does stimulate you to stay awake. Um, some of these devices have apps to, if you go into settings and you uh, it may be called daylight, nighttime light setting. To switch that on means that it switches your screen to an orange screen after the sun sets, thus not stimulating you to stay awake when looking at any of these screens. But regardless, staring at any of these screens is a very high dose of light that stimulates you to be awake. And from everything I've ever read in terms of getting good restful sleep, taking the television out of your bedroom is one of the best things you can do, and not taking any of these devices. Having some place in your house, and I made a kind of electronic shelf downstairs where everybody can plug their electronic devices in, but it is a full stairwell away from the bedrooms. Of course, it doesn't necessarily keep people from not carrying their devices to bed, of course, but it is an encouragement to leave them downstairs and then come back the next morning to pick them up fully charged. Maybe a suggestion for your home as well. Another thing is sleeping with animals, uh, particularly if you have cats. They are nocturnal. They are they will keep you some point of shallow sleep. They'll diminish. Let me just say they'll diminish the quality of sleep that you have every evening. And I know I'm holding back the ocean with the broom. There are loved, beloved animals that we would do anything for. I have two cats as well in my house, and they get locked downstairs uh, because they would just keep us up all hours of the night, goofing off. Dogs are a little bit different. Now, humans involved with dogs, they've been a part of our human existence for 10,000 years. So they do sleep on our cycle. They might do a lot less of disturbing our sleep, but anytime you have another body in your bed with you, you will be more conscious of what that other person or animal is doing. There's some studies about even spouses and how the restful sleep that they get if they sleep separately or together. And I am on. Uh, I'm not changing that in my personal existence. I'll be sleeping with my wife, even though she might be keeping me awake some nights. Another thing to think about, and I don't think this is a hard sell, is keeping your bedroom cool. I believe that most New Englanders do this kind of thing. I live in an old farmhouse that has no heat in the bedrooms, and I think most people prefer it to be cool. But this is very good for us to sleep well in cool conditions like that. Exercising daily, I did mention that before, that if you exercise during the daylight hours, this also helps those circadian rhythms and thus your wake and sleep cycle. So in this video, that worried sick video, there was a woman named Haramander. She's a Sikh. The Sikh religion uh, came out of India, Southern Asia, along with Buddhism. Both of those religions are much older than Christianity. She wears a headdress, which isn't Arab; it's Asian. She's obviously an American that became a part of this religion. Don't know much more about her, but that she is very good at meditating, and she was willing to be put inside of an MRI machine to take a look at her brain to see what it's like when she meditates. She would, when they put her in the MRI machine. And I don't know if any of you have been in MRI machines. And if you have, you know very well that they are really noisy, very claustrophobic, and it takes quite a bit of time. Many people can get quite anxious being put in one of these things. And it is the most unlikely environment that for anyone to even meditate in. But if you're good at meditation, it is a very good skill to take into one of these if you are anxious about going in one. They put her in it and had her just thinking random thoughts. She had, and on top of doing all this in there, she also had, if you see in the movie and look closely, she has her nose plugged and she's breathing through a hose, a tube, to measure her respirations when she's breathing in and when she's breathing out to see how many respirations she's doing. This will have some relevance at the end. So they put her in there, looked at her brain when she's thinking normal thoughts, and then when she's meditating. And what they find when she's meditating is this: the amygdala and the hippocampus. These are the areas that are stimulated. Basically, this is what your brake pedal looks like. This is the area where relaxation, immune system, the maintenance of your body is dictated from. This is where your parasympathetic tone comes from. And this is the area that was stimulated when she was doing meditation. So, what I want to have you all do is a kind of meditation, stress management that may stimulate this area of your brain. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. What I would like all of you to do is to sit in your chair with your feet on the floor and to put one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest. Okay? Basically, on your stomach, on your chest, just like you see there. If you need to close your eyes or not, it's completely up to you. But what I want you to do is to observe what happens when you breathe in. You take a big breath. What happens to your hands when you do that? And then as you breathe out, what happens then to your hands? So as I breathe in, what is my hand on my stomach doing? What is the hand on my chest doing? And as I breathe out, what are they doing? And basically, I'm observing how my chest is moving, how my stomach is moving when I breathe in and out. Now, just in the act of you doing that, paying attention to what is happening to your hands as you breathe in and as you breathe out, you are, what they said in the movie, paying attention to what is called biological relevance. And basically, you breathing in and out and paying attention to what you're doing at that point, you are putting your foot on that brake pedal. You are stimulating the amygdala and the hippocampus. But in a more practical sense, what is happening? When your diaphragm, and your diaphragm is this area right here, it's a muscle that dissects your body right at your lower rib area. If you feel where your ribs are on your, right at the lower portion of your ribs, you will feel this muscle right here is called the diaphragm. In its relaxed state, the diaphragm is a dome, and it is also attached here at the upper portion. So as you take a breath in, what is happening as this muscle is contracting, it's pulling on these lungs and opening them, much like opening a pair of bellows. And you open a pair of bellows, that creates a vacuum and the air comes in. And then as you close the bellows, the air goes out. And that is this state right here. So as the muscle contracts and goes down, what it does is it presses on everything below it, all your guts. That's a medical term, by the way. Your guts get pressed on and they expand outward. So, what should happen when you're breathing is that your hand on your stomach should rise as you breathe in and settle as you breathe down. There shouldn't be too much happening with your hand on your chest. There's a little bit of motion, but not a lot. The thing is that if it's done correctly, this is diaphragmatic breathing. However, as we grow up and we become and let me back up a little bit. If you watch your animals, if you have animals or if you have children or grandchildren, if you watch them sleep, you will see as they breathe in, the stomach rises, and as they breathe out, the stomach settles. But once those children become more conscious of who they are and society and the pressures of society, it's not so attractive to have your stomach sticking out. And what many people learn is that when they breathe in, their stomach sticks out. So they learn to then contract the muscles in their stomach to try to keep their stomach in as they breathe in. And so some of you may have had this opposite response, whereas as you breathe in, your stomach went in and your chest went out because something's got to give. There has to be some expansion in there. So you may not be doing this consciously, but it's something that we are conscious of in our society, that we want to contract our, keep our stomach from sticking out. So we'll contract our stomach muscles to keep that from happening, and the chest will go up and down like this. Indeed. What I want, and for all of you being athletes, people who exercise and are somewhat shorter breath, using the diaphragmatic breathing and your diaphragm correctly is important, just in terms of the mechanical uh, attributes of it. So when you breathe in, I want you to breathe in and have your stomach rise, and then as you breathe out, to have it settle. Okay. That helps you as an athlete, and it will help you in terms of stress management as well. So after all that I've spoken about, we get to this. I want you to do this technique in terms of when you breathe in, to have your stomach rise, and when you breathe out, it settles. If that is not easy for you, great, because that gives you now a focus on your biology, gives it biological relevance. And by doing that, you then activate your amygdala and your hippocampus. You put your foot on the brake pedal. That's parasympathetic tone. Those are all your words that will be on the test, by the way, your vocabulary words. If it is not hard for you, if you, when you breathe in, your stomach rises and falls, just like we described initially, then I want you to control that breathing. As you breathe in, I want you to slow that breathing down. A suggestion I make here is that every breath you breathe in for the count of 7 seconds, 1001, 1002, a nice slow breath in, and then something a little longer, 8 seconds, counting out as you breathe out. And this is simply a suggestion. I don't want you to get wrapped up in this. Whatever the count is in and whatever the count is out, that's okay. The only thing I'm going to hold you to is that you're breathing out longer than you're breathing in. And what we know by studies of human breath and the parasympathetic nervous system is that if you breathe out longer than you breathe in, you will then, of course, stimulate the amygdala and the hippocampus, thus parasympathetic tone. And so, what you're doing here essentially is not just relying on sleep to create parasympathetic tone, but to also do it, activate it at any time during the day as well. This will have a beneficial effect on you throughout the day to take a break from the gas pedal and to get on the brake pedal to some degree. And if you get good at it by practicing it, it can come in handy in so many ways, particularly these days when things are so bloody stressful in our world. To take a break from that can be so good for you. But let's just use some for instances. If I'm sitting in the dentist office and I don't particularly like what the dentist is going to do to me, when I get into that chair is to be able to do some diaphragmatic breathing and to calm it down, not to get more on the gas pedal, but get a little bit more on the brake. Or say you're driving to cardiac rehab from Hinsdale and you're crossing that bridge and the train uh, arms come down for the freight train that is going to cross there at Anarchy intersection. And now it's going to delay you from getting to cardiac rehab, which I know none of you ever want to do on purpose. And you have two choices at that time. If you can't move because the train is blocking you from moving, you have two choices. One is get on the gas pedal and get upset. And what that will do for your situation is nothing. Or you can put your car in park and put your brake on, literally and figuratively, and do some diaphragmatic breathing. Don't worry, when it's time to go, the guy behind you will let you know when that is time. Okay? So, what I want to do here is for 5 minutes, we're going to try a little diaphragmatic breathing. You may have, no, you will have moments where your brain is going to think of other things. Other things are going to come in. And when that happens, you're going to go, oh, well, that's a thought, that's a list, that's a plan, and just name it, and then come back to breathing again. Some amount in, a little longer out. And if you need to say something like in as you breathe in and out as you breathe out, and maybe count how long the breath is coming in, saying in, count how long it is going out, saying out. But if you get distracted, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up over it. There's going to be noises, there's going to be all sorts of commotion, but you have a cone of silence around you. Any questions about this? I'm going to take you to the ocean. 5 minutes. Try to dive. Breathe in first. Breathe out. Get the diaphragmatic breathing correctly. Now just in the rise, as you breathe in, and settle. Very good. Now, one thing I'll ask you is after doing that, if you pay attention to your hands, are they warmer or cooler than they were when you started? If I what I discussed before in terms of the Dalai Lama and the people that were being studied by Herbert Benson, that uh, this response would generally dilate your arteries, thus warming your hands and feet, your appendages to some degree. Now, there are a few meditative apps and programs. Well, I only put up the three that I have ever used. I am sure there are many, many more out there, but these I know and I use and I trust. So I'll recommend them to you. 10% Happier. I learned about this through a podcast by Dan Harris. Dan Harris is a TV reporter that worked for Good Morning America. I don't have a TV, so I've never seen him on there, but I guess he famously had a panic attack on live television some time ago. Thus, took him down the road of meditation. And although he doesn't teach any meditation, he facilitates many meditative teachers on his app, his 10% Happier app. This is an app that I've actually paid to use for the past year and a half. Calm is another one that I started to use right at the beginning of the pandemic, only because Broward Memorial Hospital gave us a free subscription to it, which I thought was brilliant. There is a lot of interesting stuff on Calm that I use all the time. And some of the same people that are on 10% Happier are also on Calm as well. But it's a lot more tools in Calm, whereas 10% Happier and also Headspace pretty much is simply about doing meditation. On the Calm app, it has storytelling, it has nature sounds, it has all sorts of things. So the Calm app has a lot of stuff on it. So if there's something you don't like, there is something on there that you will like. I am sure of it. So those are three that I think are very good apps. There's a free version of them, which limits the amount you can use, but you can get by just fine on all three of these without having to pay anything. But the paid version, and the only two I know that have been paid for me or I'm paying for, is the 10% Happier and the Calm app. Both of them worthwhile uh, financially as well. So at the bottom of the page here, you see the videos. This video will go on the BMH website, which is bmhvt.org slash capital C, capital R. And that is where you can find this video and all our other videos that we have recorded at some point in the future. We will have all the videos that we have done here recorded there at bmhvt.org dash slash capital C, capital R.